So welcome back to another episode, and yes, the episode is called The Night My Life Changed, and it did. This is not a clickbait title, this is a follow-up to another episode I did maybe about a year and a half back called The Year My Life Changed. And that was about when I turned 21, I went to England, and I came back and I really got into anime and video games even more so than I ever had before, and drawing. It was a really inspirational time for me. Everything was on the up and up. And I just want to say that this episode is my Empire Strikes Back moment where everything goes wrong after this. And I haven't told this story ever on the channel in 17 years I've been doing the show presently, and I've always wanted to talk about this story. It's just a story about my life, like we all have our lives, so we're all going through them and weird things happen to us all. This is just my kind of story. So, yes, we got to go back to 1994 into 1995 when I come back from England. Everything was going so well. I met a great girl, or so I thought, and everything was on the up and up. I was drawing. I was a part of, basically a video gaming community, an anime community, and a fanzine community in England. And so this is what happened at that time. I got the invite to go to a convention, not to be a guest, just to go and experience it. And it was an anime convention in Birmingham, England. And I was like, yeah, I'll go to that. That'd be great. And so the interesting thing is we booked my tickets, but my parents booked me for a month there. Okay, not for like 2 weeks or a week and a half, a month in England. So they thought, well, if you're going to go to England, you might as well go for a month. And I understand that mentality. The only problem was I had a girlfriend at the time, and I didn't really want to be away for about a month. That'd be a little bit long, but it was what it was. And so, yes, I got on the plane, I went to the convention, and it was really, really cool. It was cool to see an anime con at that time in England, and it was fascinating for me to meet all the other creators of fanzines at that time, because back in the day, you do like fanzines. So this is one out of England called Roll Call, and I did a bunch of artwork out of it and stuff like that. And this was a really kind of a interesting thing where, yeah, people do like comics on. I think is it Secret Mana? I think something like that. Yeah, it is. And they do comics and write-ups of everything, and they just write about their favorite stuff to do with role-playing games or anything to do with that, to do with anime. And so I was a part of this community, and I was drawing for these things. I was writing articles. That's how you express yourself before there was the internet the way it is now. And so this is very interesting that I knew all the people who were involved in this entire community in England, even though I lived in Canada. And we all did like pen pal stuff back then. We would all write to each other. So this convention was kind of interesting that I could go to it and meet everybody. And we could share our artwork and talk about anime, talk about video games. It was awesome. And I had a great time at that convention. Yeah, so I was there, and then I went back to stay with my nana in England, and just, I was talking to my girlfriend. I could phone her up once in a while. It was just a different time. Now you could FaceTime every day. You couldn't back then. So it felt like a very long month. And it was a very long month. And I just want to say something interesting about this convention while I was there, because it was an anime con. But I remember hanging out on one side of the convention, and all of a sudden somebody said, there's video games for sale. And I remember there's like 5 of us, and we all went running. We're all like so excited. We're all, I was like 21 years old. This is 30 years ago, this story. It's kind of wild. And we all ran over, and there was a whole bunch of RPGs for sale. And at this time in England, like role-playing games weren't being brought out over there the same way that they were in America. And so everybody was starved for RPGs, and I saw a little game over there, Far East of Eden, right here. I'm just gonna get that out of the shine. And this is the copy that I bought. And I bought it at that convention 30 years ago. And at that time, as you know, I knew about Far East of Eden. I was a big fan of the character designer, Yoshiteru Sujino, but I didn't ever know that 30 years in the future I'd get a kabuki drawing by him. I mean, that'd be impossible for the John back 30 years ago, who was at this convention, and I saw this and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to buy it. I think it was like 20 pounds or some crazy thing. And so I bought it, thinking that, yeah, I can go and play it on my TurboGrafx PC Engine when I get home. And that's what I did. But we're going to save that story for a second.
Cut
So the month went by, and it was time to return to Canada. And so, oh my God, this is just such a, even 30 years later, it's such a weird story to me. So I get on the plane, I come back, and the jet lag was just astronomical for me. It was really, really crazy. So I arrived back, my parents picked me up with the girlfriend at that time. And I bought her a whole bunch of things. She was really into Disney stuff, and I bought her all this Lion King stuff while I was over there, all that. And as we're driving home, I just got, my spider sense is incredible. My spider sense was going off. I was like, something's up. Something's really weird here. And she was just kind of like a bit cold and a bit distant and a bit weird. And I'm like, what is going on? So we came back. I'm kind of unpacked my stuff. I gave her this stuff, and I could see that she was kind of visibly upset to get this stuff. Like she felt bad, and we're gonna get there. And so, anyway, so I can't believe it. I get off a plane from England. It was like the traveling all day in England to get there. I'm back. I drove her home. Using my dad's car, and I drove her home, and I got to her place. And I was sitting in the car with her, and she's been really weird, really distant. And I just turned to her and I said, "You cheated on me, didn't you?" And then she just started crying. And I knew, and I was just like, and we've all had these moments. I am not the only person who's ever had this happen. And especially when you're younger, it hits you like a ton of bricks. It's like the worst thing in the entire world. I think being cheated on for anybody is the worst thing in the entire world. And I'd been away for a month, and there's no excuse, but we were young, and things, not everything works out for people, and I get that. But I remember I was sitting in the car, and I said, "Give me 1 second." And she's like crying, and she's all upset. And I get out of the car, and I light a cigarette, and I start smoking the cigarette because I was a smoker at that time, and I was just in deep thought. And I just walked around the car, right to the front, didn't look at her. I got in the car and I just turned to her and said, "Get out." And that was, and so she was desperately, really upset and all of that stuff. And so she got out. And here, I don't know, I just want to tell this story. So she gets out, and I'm like devastated. I'm dealing with a breakup. I'm also dealing with the jet lag. And I just feel really messed up. And I remember I came home, and I don't even know if I told my parents about it. And I went to my bathroom, I had my room downstairs. And I remember just throwing up. My nerves, everything. I just was like, ugh. I felt so sick to my stomach by everything. It was like, it's heartbreaking. It's like, that's the worst kind of thing in the world for a younger person to have to deal with. It's really, really terrible. Especially when you thought you trusted the person, you thought you knew the person. Obviously you don't. And I just sat there, and I was just kind of like in a real daze and a real funk. I was not good. And then the moment had happened, because it'd been a month. I was back home. I had Far East of Eden, and I'm like, I need to see this game, even though in my darkest hour of being upset, having a breakup and jet lag. It was like, it's time for Far East of Eden. I put it in, and it was kind of like, I remember being hypnotized by it, because I was so kind of like in a daze of being upset, jet lag, having a breakup. It was insanity to me. And I put it in, and I watched the entire intro of all of the characters. And then we got to Kabuki, and I just was like, oh my God. I know you look at these graphics now, and you're like, well, again, you're saying that's novel. But at the time, 30 years ago, this was like cutting edge stuff. And the soundtrack, the music that hit in, and it was kind of, I can't ever describe it, but I was hypnotized by it. And I was kind of like in the zone. And the opening of Far East of Eden always reminds me of that night and that breakup and how devastated I was and how horrible it was. So yeah, I ended up telling my parents, And they were like, oh my God, and all of that. And, over the next, week, me and the ex-girlfriend at that point has a few conversations about, how, why, and what had happened. I'm not going to get into all the details of that. She just met somebody in college. I mean, it happens. I look back now and I'm like, things happen. But it was a bit of a sting at the time for the ego, right? Your ego is like hurt. You're like, what's going on? So yeah, I was really kind of disturbed by that. I gave her back all of her stuff. She'd let me some bunch of stuff, and I brought it back. And it was kind of upsetting because that girl had kind of got me into Tarantino. She brought me to some of the Chinese malls at that time, and that's where I got the Chrono Trigger soundtrack. And it was kind of a cool time period for me, where I come back from England and it was the best time ever. And then I'd gone back to England for a convention, and I came back and it was the worst time ever, And I must admit, at that time I kind of fell off. I didn't stop drawing, but the bubble of happiness that I felt had kind of burst. And I kind of went back into kind of a bit of a funk. I started drinking again, going partying again, getting involved in all that kinds of stuff. And it was kind of weird to see the return. I got lost. I got lost in the fog again. And it's interesting. I bumped into a few people at conventions, some younger people who came up to me and Kim, even this summer, that said that they'd watched the show and they got some inspiration from it because they were in their early 20s and they were in some dark times. And I remember not grabbing that person, but saying to that person, like, come closer to us here, to me and Kim. I said, we've all felt that way. We've all gone through those moments. Like, it's not only you, it's everybody. We've all gone through that. And it's okay. It's okay to be lost. And I just want to say that to anybody watching this, younger or older or wherever you're at in your life, it's okay to be lost. Don't beat yourself up about it. It's a wild thing. And so I was lost for a long time. And then I mentioned, I'm not going to go through all the details of it. I mentioned it in another episode, losing my dad. So just during a bit after that time period, my dad had a little bit of backache, went to the hospital. Long story short on this, and he had lung cancer. And I think it was like 3 weeks, a month later, he passed away. And he, kind of left me, my mom, and my sister, and we were I was 23. It was devastating. It was devastating to lose, my dad. It was like, it was impossible. And that left a huge hole in my life. And so, going from that big high, being 21, getting back into anime and all that great stuff, going into the low of the breakup, and then going into the low of losing my dad, it was a very dark time. It was a very, very strange time for myself. And then going back into drinking and partying and just kind of I think I was just trying to forget everything that was going on and have a bit of fun if I could. And it was a really weird time. And so, yeah, eventually, as I say, my dad passed, and we were living in the aftermath of that. And the aftermath was a very weird time, because a lot of really interesting, cool things were happening in pop culture. Like Final Fantasy VII just got released after my dad passed away. And I jumped into that game, and that music always haunts me. And it's a bit of a weird time. And then there was another game coming out, and this is the really wild one, was Final Fantasy Tactics. And there's a new version of it, and it's really amazing. And but this is the version I got back then, and Rob picked it up for me. I gave him money, and I met him at Burger King, and he slid this copy to me, and I was playing it. And this music, I just want to say, this game and the music's really enveloped my life at the time. I know this sounds really weird, but this is the time that Titanic came out, and I remember I'd be drinking a bunch of beer on a night, and Titanic had come out, and playing Final Fantasy Tactics. And I had a different girlfriend at the time, and I'm not even going to show any pictures of her or anything, because that was short-lived as well. It's just a very unusual time period. I was lost. And this is where we get to the point when the night my life changed. Is I was not in a very good headspace. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was really confused. And there was no internet the way there is now, so you couldn't really network with people to figure something out. I was really lost. And it was just me and my mom in the house at that time and our little dog. And one night, this is such a weird night because it's something I remember so very well, is that it was it was the summertime and it was very warm out. And it must have been around 12:30, 1 at night. And I had my Discman at the time, and I had Final Fantasy Tactics in it. And I had my headphones on, and I had my cigarettes on me, and I'd had a few beers. And I had a nice little buzz going on. And I went and did something that was kind of out of the norm for me to do. I went to my parents, because I was in their house, still living there. And I went to the front garden, and they had a nice garden. And I laid down on the grass, and I looked up, and I was listening to Final Fantasy Tactics. I get shivers, man. This is the moment, the night that my life changed. There's a certain song that plays. I think it's called like Decisive Battle or something like this. It's off the top of my head right now. And I laid back, and it was one of those nights when the stars were so bright. There was not a cloud in the sky. And there was a quiet neighborhood. There was nobody out. It was, my neighborhood was quiet in general, but it was extra quiet this night. And I just looked up at the stars, and this music was playing, and it just hit me in the right mode at the right time. And I looked up at the stars, and I was like, my life is going to change. My life is going to change. And I sat there and I dreamt. I was dreaming while I was awake, and I was like, I'm going to apply for film school. I'm going to film school, and I'm going to do it as soon as possible. As soon as possible. And I had this moment, I had this revelation, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, you need to change, and we are going to change, and we're going to make a change now. No more feeling sorry for ourselves. No more living in the past. No more, just kind of drowning yourself, drinking and partying. We need to change my life. And I just want to say something. I was scared. I was really scared. I know you'd be like, whoa, but wouldn't that be exciting to go to film school? It was, but it was such a big change in my life. And I was kind of a guy at that point, I didn't like a lot of change. I liked kind of the routines of where my life was, but it was time to cut and sever the past at that point and to move forward in a brand new direction. And so I think this was like on the Friday. On the Monday, I went down to film school, and I brought all my portfolio of art, and I had a lot of art to show. And they're like, yeah, you're definitely of the right caliber to be in here. And so I joined up. And a lot of people have asked, what kind of film school was it? It was animation, and it was hand-drawn animation. But what was so great about the school is I ended up going, and I met a lot of great people, and I had a lot of new experiences. And I met a new girlfriend that would be also short-lived, that would last for a little bit of time. But it was cool during the film school time. And I got to draw every day with really good artists and share our art and our passions. And there was a lot of those people went off to do some great things. One of my friends in the class went off to work on Family Guy, became a director there. It was really weird. This is like 1998. It was a good thing for me. And when I first got into film school, I had to kind of shake off my past and get with the program. And I did. And I started drawing every day. My art increased. I kind of leveled up that way. I learned storyboarding, and I was really fascinated by that. I learned 1-point and 2-point perspectives. And so Vancouver Film School was very, very good for me. I was class 21 at that time. I don't even know what class they would be on now. And I would graduate from there, and I would go off to do other wild things. When I first graduated, I worked on some television commercials, and I have one of them.
Tykes on trikes should watch for tykes.
I found it on YouTube, and I've got a link to the person whose YouTube channel I got this from. And I talked to them about it, and they said I could put it up on the channel, and I'll link to them down below where the original video was uploaded. It was a wild thing. So YTV was a channel in Vancouver here, and so I worked as an in-between artist. So I don't know if you know what that is, but it's on animation. There's a key poses, and then there's breakdowns, and then there's in-betweens, where somebody would draw the in-between line drawings, and I would do that. And I remember, here's a little bit of claim to fame that I brought to this commercial, was I'd finished my art for the day, and I said to the main animator, I said, can I draw shadow levels for all of the, for this animation? He's like, what, you really want to do that? And I said, yeah, because I was a big anime fan, and I loved in anime, on like say a face, where there'd be the skin tone, and then there'd be a darker skin tone, then an even darker skin tone. And with really expensive anime, you get 4 skin tones on there, or even for armor, for robot, everything, any one color would have 4 shades to it. And I love that. And so I said, can I add extra shades? He said, yeah. So no joke, I did like 700 plus shadow level drawings that day because I was inspired. I wanted to see the color shading on it. And if you watch it in slow motion, you can see the shading on it. It's a very old commercial. It's from like, as I say, oh God, it must be like 26 years ago. I think I did that in 1999.
Tykes on Trikes should watch for Tykes.
I did that job for a little bit. Then I got a job at a software company, drawing maps before there was Google Maps. And we would draw maps, and so you go to a city, and you could look up where you were in the city. I drew all the maps for this software company. I did that for quite a few years before that company went under. And that's where I want to end this story. That was my arc, getting back into the animation world, and getting into the animation world, and getting to comics. And I just want to say, I didn't even mention, but I drew comic books as well during all of that time. And film school helped me, and it really helped me develop as an artist, because I went in thinking I thought I was all right, but I didn't know how much further I could get. And I'm always thankful of that night, laying on my parents' front grass, looking up at the stars, and I don't know what it was, the little bit of strength I had in me yelled out and said, let's make a change. And I did, and it was a great change for me, and it shaped my whole life. It changed my whole life. Going to film school put me in a totally different zone than I was in before. A totally different journey. And I would meet different people, and people I still talk to this day. And I think that's remarkable. And if I didn't do all of those things, I wouldn't be here today. And it's kind of wild when you think about that. Like all the small decisions you do in your life, even the small ones can make such a big change for you. And so I want to end this video here because I'm getting, this is crazy. I got shivers from this one. I think I have a video of myself, and I haven't got it right now to show, of myself, of the chapter that happens after this one that will lead into the show. And it's a crazy video. I filmed myself one night talking to a camera about where I was at in my life at that time. This is like years before I had the show. And it's so remarkable because it's talking about all the things I want to share and all the things I'd like to figure out. And that would eventually become the show. But I didn't know that at that time. And I'll save that for whenever I get that out of the closet to find that tape again and get it digitized and to show you guys. But guys, I just wanted to share the night that my life changed forever. I hope it was an interesting story. I hope it was somebody can get, if one person can get something out of it, I hopefully I've done my job here and all that. And thanks everybody for watching. So anyways, guys, until next time.